Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we sit down with guests to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal, especially right now we get that times are tight. No worries. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast, and share it with your friends. Joining me today, we have the regular stalwart here on That D Plus Show, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? And then for the for his debut on this show and anything That Nerdy Site related, really, we have Joe Moran, aka Mr. Badbit. How you doing, Joe?
Hello, everybody. I have good news to report. John Stamos is A-OK. I saw him trending on Twitter. I thought the worst. I went to look, and I can indeed, I tell you all, wholeheartedly, John Stamos is fine.
Thank God, because I have been unplugged from social media for like the hour or two prior to this this Discord call. So it's good to know that we haven't lost Mr. Stamos.
The Stamos, yeah.
The Stamos. So this week we're going to be talking all about the very recent Pixar release, Onward. And the reason we're going to be talking about that is because I was on the Trophy Room a couple weeks ago, which is Joe's, aka Mr. Badbit's, PlayStation podcast. And when I was making kind of the plugs and going through here, the things we do at That Nerdy Site, I mentioned this show, and he was like, "You need to have me on when you guys talk about Onward." And so about a week ago, Cameron was like, "Hey, we should do Onward," and I was like, "Okay, well, I already have kind of promised it to Joe, so let's get him on in the mix," and we did. And we were originally going to try and have this out for Tuesday on a normal time, but about an hour before we were supposed to record this episode originally, my roof just started leaking. I've had roofers here at my apartment for the last couple weeks, and they've just been banging out their re-roofing, and just like suddenly something started dripping in from in my little main living area, which happens to be like where I record because I live in a tiny studio apartment. So I was like, I don't think that like steady dripping into a pot is going to be great for podcast audio. Also, I don't want it getting worse while I'm doing a podcast. So
you don't want the roof to cave in.
That would have been. Let's be fair. That would have been an amazing podcast.
I mean, potentially.
If like halfway through, you're just like, "Oh no, it's gotten bigger," and then like we just hear water pouring in, and you're like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, it would have been something. So I had to postpone, but we're here recording, and I thank you guys for accommodating and rescheduling with me. So let's dive into Onward, but before we do, I want to throw it to you, Joe, first, and then Cameron as well, because you also suggested wanting to really tackle this one. Why is Onward the Disney Plus offering that you wanted to bring to the table, Joe?
So I saw, I don't know where it's from, but it got a lot of crap, and justifiably so. But a title called Onward is Frozen for boys, and I'm like, that's an awful title. But for me, I have an older brother, so immediately, well, maybe it's not an awful title because it worked. I was like, well, if it is like a story about brothers, I got a brother, I could relate, so let's watch this. And I was thinking about going to the theater and watching it, but then the whole Rona thing happened, and so seeing that it was on Disney Plus, I was like, well, this is a nice fun time to like spend with my brother to watch a movie about brothers, and that's why it spoke to me. Also, Tom Holland and Chris Pratt. I mean, bam! Yeah. I'm already on board.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Cam?
So as a side note, I apologize for earlier blurting out "Have mercy." That I was trying to think of like a John Stamos like catchphrase from Full House. I'm like, there is one that like would fit this perfectly. Like, oh, he's okay, and it's like, oh, have mercy. That would have been perfect. But I'm me, and so of course that didn't happen. I'm explaining it now. Onward was a film that I was actually super, like when I first saw the first trailer, I was like, oh, okay. I saw the second trailer, and I was like, this is not going to be good. And then I saw the last trailer, I was like, oh, okay, I'm on board. The trailers went from a very like light teaser that this was going to be like a Pixar film about magic and brothers and stuff, and I was like, cool. And then
it introduced that weird like, hey, the dad doesn't have a top half in the second trailer.
And they just
that turned a lot of people off. Yeah.
Yeah, that just was like one thing I was like, Trevor, was I in the theater with you? When we
I
saw
feel like I was in the theater with you on like the third one that
the
turned you
third
around.
one. That's what I'm referencing. Like the third one, I was like, the trailer for Onward's coming up. I was like, I turned to Trevor and goes, and I go, this film, I just don't think it's going to be very good. Like I'm just not impressed by the trailer so far. And then after the third, after the third trailer, I turned to Trevor. I was like, Trevor, I'm on board.
Yeah, I think it might have been like when we went and saw Sonic the Hedgehog. I think the trailer came on. You're like, yeah, I think I'm in.
Yeah, because I saw the weekends at Bernie's type of thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm on board. You had me at Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's works because he's dead, but he was alive, and people think he's alive. This it didn't correlate to me that this was going to be like bottom half getting into hijinks with that the top half, and people would like the moment the Pixie showed up, and it's just like the glasses like drop down a little bit, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
At that moment in the trailer, I'm like, okay, like they know what they're doing with this. It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
And then it turned out to be like even better than I thought it would.
Ooh,
yeah,
awesome.
For me, this is one I did see this in theaters before everything started shutting down. It was like this and Emma were the last two movies I saw before all the theaters closed. And this is one that I had certainly had on my radar since kind of like the first trailers, because I love the just the concept of what would happen if like the fantasy world of Tolkien and all that kind of stuff did just kind of progress normally, and you got electronics and technology and all that stuff. So like from those first teasers where that kind of idea was introduced, I was like, oh, this seems like it's going to be something up my alley. That said, I've never watched the movie Bright, because I just feel like that's like it's that same kind of like aesthetic, and I just, for whatever reason, probably just because I'd heard so many bad things about it, that I never bothered watching that Netflix film. But yeah,
I was about to watch it, and then like the stuff.
Yeah, all the Max Landis stuff. Yeah. But yeah, for the sake of this, I was like, yeah, and I trust Pixar. The only Pixar movie I've never seen is The Good Dinosaur, but every other Pixar movie I've liked at the very least. Some of them are some of the finest films out there. So yeah, this is definitely one that I had on my radar for a while, and as things started kind of like ramping up, I was like, well, I'll go check this out in theaters while I can. And then yeah, sure enough, we're a month and a half out from its debut, and it's already out there on Disney Plus, because that was the only way they could really get it out to people. So yeah, a little bit of history lesson for you. As I kind of just mentioned, this was originally released March 6th, 2020. So 5 weeks ago?
8 years ago?
Yeah. Depending on how long this quarantine has felt. Other notable releases at the time, or of the time, being the last couple months, were Dolittle, which came out in January of 2020, and Sonic the Hedgehog, which came out Valentine's Day of this year. And then yeah, there has pretty much been nothing else since. It has an hour and 42-minute runtime, and then in the Disney Pixar timeline of things, this falls obviously between Toy Story 4 last year, which had come out June 21st, 2019, and Soul, which when we were originally set to record had a different date than it does today, now that we're actually recording, because it just got delayed a few weeks back, or a few days ago. So I've just kind of got that in there right now as a TBD. Whenever Soul comes out, that is the next Pixar film in the timeline of things. So let's dive into a little bit of the roll call here. The director, as well as one of the writers, Dan Scanlon, who done a few other Pixar things. Notably, he had done the Mater and the Ghostlight short, one of the many, many Cars shorts that are out there. And he was also the director and writer of Monsters University. So this was kind of his first stab at like an original Pixar idea concept. Other writers include Keith Boonin, who the only thing of note that I recognized was the film Horns from a few years ago with Daniel Radcliffe, where he's basically a guy who just suddenly gets horns growing out of his head and kind of looks like a satyr. I remember like seeing the trailer and images for that, but have never actually seen the film.
I've seen it.
How is it?
As somebody who I read the book first and then saw the film. They do a pretty good job of an adaptation. It's pretty good.
Okay.
But at this end of the day, it's a bit of a bold concept. At the end of the day, when it all comes down to the ending of that thing, and so there's a lot that goes on in the book where like he experiments with the horns a lot more than he does in the show or in the film. But in the end, it all comes out like it's pretty solid. Like, you know, Daniel Radcliffe's in it. He does a really good performance. I think that's his first like filmed American accent that he's ever done. Was in that one. Does a pretty good job of it. You know, it's a good film.
All right. And then the rounding out the trio of writers, you had Jason Headley, who his most notable IMDb credit is A Bad Idea Gone Wrong. I didn't recognize anything from his line of work, but he did a good job, I thought, with Onward. So, and then starring this, and I remember I actually saw this twice in theaters when it was out, because I saw it like opening night, and then I also saw it with like my family that weekend. I think that was. I don't remember why we saw it, but like me, my dad, and my sister basically went and saw it. And he was kind of talking. My dad, in particular, was like, he noticed how few people were in this film, and I was like, yeah, it's a really small cast. So we've got kind of the four primary characters here. You've got Tom Holland playing Ian, who obviously is probably best known as Spider-Man in the MCU since Captain America: Civil War. You have Chris Pratt playing Barley, the older brother, notably from Parks and Rec, the Lego Movie, and then Star-Lord in the MCU since Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as his recent turn in Jurassic World. You have Julia Louis-Dreyfus playing Laurel, the mom. Of course, Seinfeld, New Adventures of Old Christine, and Veep being some of her most notable roles. And then
AKA all bangers.
All bangers. Mm-hmm. One of the few people that has been nominated for Emmys across 3 different shows, and won for many of them, I'm sure. And then rounding out kind of the core quartet, you have Octavia Spencer, aka the Manticore. I always think about this when I see her. She is in the original Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire one. She plays the check-in girl when he goes to do the wrestling thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Octavia Spencer, before like she kind of started breaking out, she's the one that like checks him in, and I think maybe is the one who even gives him the name Spider-Man or what. No, Bruce Campbell does in his little comedic moment there. But yeah, so she was in that. Of course, she also was in The Help and Shape of Water and many other things, Hidden Figures, all that sorts of stuff out there. So that was kind of the core cast. There are a couple other. I didn't put them in the doc, but like. The guy who plays the Centaur, I really enjoyed him in The Last Man on Earth, the actor who plays that. The guy who plays the dad, who's obviously not in the film all that much, but I remember him from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He is he in early seasons he was like Amy's super milquetoast boyfriend, and now he's on Avenue 5, the HBO show about a cruise ship gone wrong in space.
Not good,
so yeah.
By the way. Not that show.
I hate that show so much.
It's
like
terrible.
I watched through pretty much the whole first season. I was like, what am I just not getting? Like, just it's just that none of these characters are supposed to be likable. Okay, well then why am I supposed to be watching or caring about any of this? So yeah,
I don't understand why they make shows like that, because there are other shows. Well, I say that, but then there's like shows like BoJack Horseman where. I guess it's the supporting cast of BoJack Horseman that people like attach themselves to.
Yeah.
As they watch BoJack like just destroy his life and the life of others, season to season, and I don't understand the appeal of that. But
yeah, there is no Todd in Avenue 5. There's no Princess Caroline or Mr. Peanut Butter. Like there are likable characters in BoJack.
I'm the BoJack Horseman in my own life.
That's sure.
Oh my god! No, I'm joking. But anyway.
But yeah, so those are a couple other people that I recognize kind of watching through the film. And then lastly, he shows up in the trivia that we'll dive into. But John Ratzenberger, who's of course a staple of Pixar films, having a little voice cameo in every single one. He plays the one of the construction workers at the end of the film, which I did not catch the first time around. I was like, as the credits started to roll, I was like, where was John Ratzenberger? Oh my God, is John Ratzenberger okay? Did I miss that he passed away or something? And then I see him in the credits. I'm like, who the hell was construction worker Felix? And I caught on a second
Felix?
time. I was like, oh, okay, he's
he's
one of the guys at the fountain at the end who tries to like pull Barley out basically.
Mm-hmm. Is that also like an Easter egg reference to Fix It Felix?
It is, yeah. That's another there. So trivia on that D+ show. oftentimes very scarce with some of the other, a lot of the Disney movies we've pulled from, for example. Not too much in the way of like IMDb nerds writing out a whole bunch of trivia, but Pixar, Disney, MCU, all that kind of stuff has trivia for days. So I've only pulled it together a smattering, but yeah, there are a ton of like cameos and references to other Pixar as well as Disney films littered throughout here. And yeah, the construction worker, one of the notes was specifically his name's Felix, as a nod to Wreck-It Ralph's Fix-It Felix. And I was like, it seems like a stretch, but okay. But other trivia points on this film for you. Pixar's iconic Pizza Planet truck appears in the Troll Bridge toll scene, and it is actually reframed within this universe as Pizza Realm instead of Pizza Planet.
Yep.
And there are little signs in the background of shots and stuff saying Pizza Realm elsewhere. The popular A113 reference that makes an appearance in many a Pixar film is it comes up when the police call that comes through near the end says A113 in progress. A113 was the classroom used by John Lasseter, Tim Burton, and Brad Bird at the California Institute of Arts and appears in all Pixar films. We already talked about the John Ratzenberger one, but he turns up as construction worker Felix, who tries to stop Barley from climbing over all the historical monuments there at the end of the film. And then this one kind of being the one to tie it to these times. The film received great reviews from critics and audiences, with its Rotten Tomatoes score being 87 and 95% respectively. Unfortunately, it was released during the rise of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, when movie theaters were either closing or limiting capacity in an effort to limit the spread of the virus. And even with this measure, many people felt it was still unsafe to go to the movies. Eventually, it got so severe that all movie theater chains were forced to close before the film could recoup its budget. As a result, Disney made the unprecedented move of making the film available for digital download only 2 weeks after its theatrical release, as it was now the only way people could view it. And then, obviously, a few weeks later, they put it on Disney Plus for anybody. So yeah, the like crazy, and I saw like an ad or something show up in my Twitter feed a little while ago about Artemis Fowl basically just going to completely bypass films and go straight to Disney Plus now. It's like seeing that, I was like, yeah, that movie's not making any of its budget back. So the Disney like accountants are going to have a field day with their film write-offs this year, because they can't recoup any of this stuff. The movie was accompanied by the trivia in here says will be, but I didn't catch it until I actually saw it in theaters. Will be accompanied by Playdate with Destiny, a short cartoon featuring The Simpsons. Maggie of The Simpsons specifically. Tracy Ullman voices the pawn shop owner Grecklin, and The Simpsons was originally spun off from the Tracy Ullman show. So that was another weird little kind of coming full circle tease there. Director Dan Scanlon voices the fitness instructor on Laurel's workout video about being a warrior. And then Triple Dent Gum is sold at the gas station that Ian and Barley visit, which is an Easter egg for Inside Out. And then that was like one of like probably dozens and dozens of other Easter eggs. So I was like, I'm just going to wrap it up. And there are a ton of more Easter eggs and references to past Disney and Pixar films. In particular, there's like Sword in the Scone is like one of the shops in the shopping complex that the pawn shop is in. And then there's a whole bunch of like little Easter eggy things, I think, in the Manicore's Tavern and kind of all throughout. So check out IMDb for the full list if you want all of those Easter eggs and references. So now we get to the point where if we're talking about an older offering or like a Disney Plus offering, we talk about how does this hold up? So guys, how does this hold up from a movie that came out a month and a half ago? What do we think about the movie?
I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Feel free.
I came in pretty warm on this movie. Like, I was excited, but just like a lot of Pixar movies as of recently, I always think I'm gonna go to the theater to see it, and then I end up going, I got other shit to do. So I didn't have time to catch in the theater, and I probably would have missed out on this if it wasn't for Disney Plus. So I gotta say, it's not for me as funny as like I see other Pixar movies being for me, like how they hold up. Like, you know, I could always go back to Finding Nemo and find a laugh somewhere. I could always go back to like Toy Story or whatnot. You know, WALL-E in particular. Up is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it always makes me laugh. This one hit me in the feels a lot, and as someone who loves fantasy, and loves a good twist, I wanted to see more of the twist on fantasy gimmicks. Like, we saw a few with like things like the troll, or like how all quests start at a tavern. I thought that was cool, but like, I would have actually liked to see a little bit more hijinks in their adventure, if that means anything in terms of, like, I would like a scene or two of seeing other mystical ideas, places, or things or beasts that ended up being something totally different. Because I feel like, for the most part, it hit where it needed to. In terms of, like, here's a trope that you think is going to land one way, landing somewhere totally different, but then still feeling really satisfied and actually liking that conclusion more. So for me, it wasn't like, you know, I'm laughing at every scene. Some of it was hilarious, like the troll, or not troll, sorry, the fairies. They were
pixies, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, there are pixies in it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pixies in this, they were fantastic, because, like, I'm thinking of them a little, like, whimsical, like, you know, just little Tinkerbell looking peeps, and like they're bikers.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's hilarious. Of course, they're the rough and tough, right? Yeah, the tavern scene, to me, that was the funniest part for me, because you're thinking of this tavern, you're thinking of, like, thieves, bandits, and it's just like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
So I would have liked more of that, but when it gets down to, like, the brotherly aspect, they got me, because I am the younger brother, and that's what the story's following. They're following Tom Holland's character Ian, and I feel a lot like Ian. I relate to him in several ways, especially the when I was going through my, you know, late high school, maybe early into college view of what my brother was as well. So knowing that we're so close, but at the same time we're so very different, and sometimes, yeah, there's like an embarrassment that comes to it, because, like, my older brother is also kind of like my dad in some aspects. So, like, those scenes hit me really hard, especially towards the end. And it's funny, because I was watching this movie with my brother, and not a tear was shed on his behalf, but me, I'm crying. Like, I'm bawling my eyes out when it comes to the end of this movie. And you know, can we spoil? Can we just go?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
treat the show as though people have watched along with us, or they've watched the thing before we're talking about it. So yeah, spoilers are fine.
Cool. So, like, when I'm watching this with my brother, and, like, the flashbacks start hitting, and, like, seeing, like, when they're kids, and, like, all the way up, and he's just like, you didn't really need a dad because your brother was your dad. I'm like, that's the same how I feel about my brother, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and I just turn to my brother, and it's lifeless. It's lifeless. And you know that, and I'm like, are you not, you son of a gun? And he's just like, oh, I love you, whatever. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then last night we watched Frozen, and he's bawling at Olaf, and I'm like, you're crying over a goddamn snowman, but not your brother. He's like, you don't understand. I'm like, I don't get it. So, for me, it still hit like a Pixar movie should hit. It does hit you with a moment of, like, I'm a 28-year-old man. I'm bawling my eyes out, and only Pixar could really do that for me. So, I loved this movie. Is it, like, you know, one of the best Pixar movies ever made? No, but it's definitely solid. It's definitely up there. It's definitely, if you are a brother, you have a brother who maybe respects you a little bit more than mine, this is something to kind of sit down and watch with them. I personally loved it. It's a strong recommend, especially because it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah. How about you, Cam? What are your thoughts?
You know, so to call my relationship with my father difficult would be an incredible understatement. For most of my life growing up, the people who kind of parented, like fathered, like were basically like my surrogate fathers, even though I had my actual father, was my older brother and then later my brother-in-law. They're two of the most influential and important men in my life. And so it's funny because like my dad did teach me how to ride my bike without training wheels. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of other stuff, like the person who taught me to drive, like the person who first made me, like put me in a driver's seat to drive was my brother-in-law. I was 12 at the time. And we were up on an empty lot, and he had this big old lifted Dodge truck at the time, and he just said, here you go, let's, like, he's like, you want to drive? I was like, sure. He goes, okay, well, we can, like, I'll let you drive around here. And I drove around for, 30, like, half an hour, and then afterwards he was like, all right, we got to get back. Like, it was, so, like, there's a lot of things that I noticed here that were very resonant, especially when the list comes out and he realizes, oh, he did have a father figure in his life, and it was his brother the entire time. But what I really loved about it, and I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me, is there's no real bad guy in this film. Yeah. There's no villain. The villain is time and mortality. Mm-hmm. Which is a very... It reminds me a lot of Inside Out. In Inside Out, there was technically no real villain. Villain was, ignorance and misunderstanding. And just like the problems of growing up. Like, Riley has this entire, like, voided out experience, and, like, people are trying to do their best to get her on track with the limited capabilities they have while, everything happens with that. But it's a really interesting thing that I really thought was so... Really, there's such a depth to a film when the villain is something that's abstract. Yeah. And it's a hard thing to land, and they land it so well here. Yep. Like, you could say the cursed dragon at the end of the film is the quote-unquote bad guy, but that's just another obstacle. That's another thing they have to, overcome. The Pixies aren't bad guys. They're just another obstacle. It's this really cool hero's journey as they're trying to spend time with their father. And it's funny and cool that their father makes such a big impact in the younger brother's life in that one day that he has with him where he's just legs. And that kind of tells you a lot about... It reinforces the quality of the person that his father was. But it also shows, like, the good upbringing that their mom and the older brother were able to do for the younger brother. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on everybody's names.
Ian's the younger brother, Barley's the older. Yeah.
You can tell Barley did a good job of teaching Ian. What, Ian?
Yeah. Yep.
Ian. Sorry, I think Ian, and immediately I think of a friend. And
Ian Purcell.
Yeah, I think of Ian Purcell, and I'm like, this is not Ian Purcell. I got it. Like, I'm like, it can't be Ian. I know Ian. It's like, no. This is one of those times where, like, you're right to, or you're wrong to assume that you're being wrong. So, yeah, Ian is just like, you can tell Ian had a good life and he was raised well by the quality of an experience that he has, even though it was just his dad's legs. Yeah. And you can tell how much his dad, like, it's really cool to see how much his dad loved him. And for them to convey that so well with just his legs, like that alone is like a storytelling challenge and like a performance challenge as far as like the artists and the vocal talents of Tom Holland. Tom Holland's phenomenal in this. He's in a higher pitch than he almost ever is, and it's fantastic. I was interested to see how Chris Pratt would play this. And because I expected it to be, that scene where he pulls up in Guinevere and he pulls out the sword and Barley's just like doing that, and during that scene. I thought he was going to be like that the entire film. And I was not excited about that. But then once I realized, oh, he knows he was being extra and now he's going to cool it. Okay, cool. Like he knows when he's being extra. He knows when he's being kind of outlandish. But it's also really interesting because there's a throwaway line at the beginning of the film where their mom says, this is the longest gap year of all time.
Yeah, I missed that when I was in theaters, but when I went back and was rewatching it for this, I was like, that's a good joke.
That's a great joke. It tells you, and it establishes, like, Barley's age. He's, like,
Yeah.
18, 19. He's not yet 20. He's yet to hit, like, adulthood. But he's been the man of the house for such a long time, and that explains his relationship with the boyfriend. And what's nice is that the boyfriend is not trying to be, like, the new stepdad. Like, he makes these jokes because he's just a very earnest doofus of a character.
Yeah.
And I like how they don't make him out to be like a villain at all. He, like, you see that he is trying to relate to the kids. And the one thing that I liked, and maybe this is just like a Kojima level of me trying to think way too abstractly about this movie, is, the movie is really about, hey, life is short. Take in the world for a minute. Everyone around you, experience things. I really, it kind of hit the nail on the head when it's like technology, phones. It's like, get off your phones, go out, experience life to the fullest, because it's finite. And I love that, to me, the father represented time.
Yeah.
And how little of it that we have, and making the most of it. And what I like what you said, how, like, they're able to convey emotions out of those legs.
Yeah.
Is like when you're seeing them dance, like, to think that, like, the father doesn't know these kids, right? But
he still
it's
connects with them.
Yeah, he still loves them unconditional. It's that love that binds these two brothers together, and that's the thing that really hit close to me. And Pixar is the masters of playing with themes, because they're able to do so expertly well, convey a deeper message that resonates with everyone of all ages, and that's why they are the best at what they do.
Yeah, I mean, as the one of the trio of us that I don't have a brother, I have a younger sister, but that's my only sibling experience.
Trevor, you don't get it. You are the brother. You are the older
exactly.
brother.
I am Barley, so to speak, in this. But even that, our father was around, he was present, and we didn't have like a strained relationship with him or anything like that. So I can't personally relate to this, but they do such a great job telling that story that it was like the moment where I was like, oh, I see where we're going with this. Like that definitely it struck me. Was when they're playing catch on like the giant floating cheese puff, and I was like, oh, playing catch was one of the things on his checklist. Oh, this is where we're going with it. Okay, and then they call back to that specific image later on when they're letting the rest of the audience like catch up to where they've been taking the story the whole time, and all of that still, like, even though I don't have that brotherly love kind of like personalized experience, they do a good enough job, or a great enough job, really kind of conveying it here between these two characters, that I still was a sobbing mess myself originally watching it, because I was like, oh, I love that. Like, I'm a sucker for any time where you get like guys really sharing empathy and emotion, because it, especially with like the films that I've grown up with and stuff, it is a rarity. So it's still it still feels refreshing in a way that that maybe something like Frozen and the sisters coming together doesn't necessarily. So yeah, I still, even though I don't have that like personal experience to draw from, as you said, Joe, the way Pixar manages to craft that story still puts all of those feelings into me. I can still imagine what life was like for these kids growing up, and see how that impacted them, and tells that story and brings it to a close there.
Yeah. And that, like, as someone who, like, my dad's downstairs, he's a good man, but for many years there was just a lack of disconnect, and like seeing how my brother was the person that showed me a lot of stuff, like him and my mom were like the people that taught me how to tie my shoes. Like my brother was the guy that really taught me how to drive. He helped show me how to swim, not teach me, but showed me through pushing me and shit. So
That little flashback just resonated so very much.
So, and that's where I was just like, oh damn it, they got me. Oddly enough, like, he like, so when that scene hit, I'm like, oh crap, it's not really about saying goodbye to the dad, it's him realizing, and like that hit so hard. And then to have the other flip of the coin where Barley, his memory with his father is not being able to say goodbye to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then his hero's journey is fulfilled. That I was just like, because I'm like, oh, at least they're not gonna have like this whole say goodbye like type of thing. Nope, they hit you twice in the gut, and that God, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great turn where we can kind of segue into like favorite least favorite moments. It's a very minor thing, but like one of my least favorite elements of this film is that it does repeat itself a little too much for my taste. Mm-hmm. In particular, like you have the opening kind of speech is repeated because that's the letter that he left for the kids, and so you get it in like narration form, and then you get Ian reading it, and so it's like okay, I get it. You don't have to like reread the whole thing, do you really? But then in that same vein, like the fact that we're introduced to like, oh, he has 3 memories of his dad, and then we get like a secret 4th memory introduced like almost at the end of the movie. I was like, I would have almost rather seen it be introduced as he has 4 memories, but he doesn't really like talking about that 4th one. Yeah. And then it gets introduced at the end, as opposed to like, it's such a known thing that Barley has 3 memories of his dad that Ian even comments and says, right, it's one of your 3 memories. So like it's, I mean, like the 4th memory being that it is a very visceral kind of like gut punch of, mm-hmm. Oh, he didn't have the strength to go see his dad when he was sick and, connected to all sorts of machines and everything. I totally get why you absolutely would repress that memory. Yeah. But it's still like, just, I felt like it could have been handled just the slightest bit better, but it is like, that really is one of my only like criticisms of the film. I think one of the things I love about it is that
sorry, I was just going to cut you off here for just a second. Yeah. That part for me, like I understand why they placed it there. I do agree where it should have been like he has 4 memories. But he's reserved about talking about them, and then bring it up again later on. Then like even that part though when he's just like, oh, I wasn't brave enough. It's the thing that goes against what he has propped him up to be, which is like, I'm this brave person, I attack things head on, and being that one thing that he's not able to, and he is that way because that one moment defined him is something I liked, and mm-hmm. something that still resonated with me because like my best friend, that's her biggest regret is just like, she loved her grandpa. When he got sick, she was like 6, 7 at the time, couldn't understand, didn't want to see him because he was, like, I guess, like, scary to her because he was hooked up to all these things barely recognizable. So that scene, again, still hit me. Maybe because I'm a big softie.
No, I mean, and certainly, like my grandmother passed away right around the time this movie came out, and she had been ill for many years, and I had pretty much. I had almost done a Barley where it was like we knew her last days were coming, and I was like, I never went and visited her when she was in the hospital or anything like that. She'd like broken her foot, 6 months earlier or something like that. Mm-hmm. I never wanted to go see her in a hospital, and she'd been in kind of a personal care facility for 6 months before she finally passed, and I repeatedly turned down like invitations to go see her. She was like the care facility was like literally a block north of my parents' house, so mm-hmm. I would go say hi to my parents or something. They'd be like, "Hey, you want to go see Grandma?" I was like, "No, I'm not comfortable in that." But 2 or 3 days before she passed, I finally kind of like succumbed, less so because of her. I didn't like I think of it as I said my goodbye to her years ago, because she'd been suffering from like Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff, and I don't believe she was registering who I was anymore.
Right.
But I went to support my mom and my aunt, who it was certainly and it had been taking a toll on them for years, whereas they had been her primary caregivers. So like even that, the story that he tells is still very resonant to me, and I can envision my own thing, and especially in the context of this having all just happened in my own life. It was like I can get why that would be a turning point, especially if you're a 2 or 3 year old child. Like that is going to define you, and yeah, he does say like, and then from that point on, he never wanted to be scared again, and that helps explain away why he's been so over the top and been so kind of boisterous throughout the film, that we get to see this little bit of vulnerability. So like I don't fault the moment at all. I love the story. I love that character moment. I just wish it had been maybe handled slightly better, or it had been introduced sooner and not fake introduced, and then paid off that way. But again, that's like a very minor thing. One of the things I really love about the film, and then I'll toss it around to you guys, is the idea that these brothers, through their adventure, are bringing magic back into the world. The recurring, like you get it maybe you get it with like the Manticore, bringing that spark back into the Manticore's life. You get it with the Pixies, where they learn how to fly after that sequence. Then you get it even with like Colt, where he decides to be a running centaur again, and let his horse legs do their thing. So I love that element of the story and how it just continues thematically throughout the film. That's one of my favorite elements as somebody who kind of came in and maybe did get a little bait and switched on like, I'm interested in the juxtaposition of technology and fantasy here, and then it really does kind of stray away from that, as you kind of touched on, Joe. Pretty early on, it becomes more about the buddy road trip movie between the brothers, so you don't get as much of those kind of like how does magic work against technology, all those kind of moments. So the fact that they managed to bring more magic back into the world throughout their adventure, I thought was a nice little just a nice little symbolic touch throughout the film. Okay. How about you, Cam? Let's throw to you for favorite moments, and then we can hit Joe.
Yeah, first off, I have to give a shout out to Colt's vehicle in the film. It is in fact a Bronco.
Yeah.
Bronco SUV, like just such a wonderful little like just a little touch there to sell it. One of my favorite things about this film was, and I think that my biggest thing that I enjoyed about this film was how that this really, and I think it's interesting that it's not really that magic disappeared from this world. It's that people have just become so accustomed to not have to work hard for what magic does that people who have the gift of magic don't even really know it. Really enchanted magical creatures don't really know it. Like, nothing about Colt changes physically. About, like, he just realizes that, yeah, I do have the ability to run 70 miles an hour. Why am I not doing it? And it's this experience of, especially Barley kind of leading Ian on this quest, but in reality, it's really the story of them fulfilling really a lot. Like, it's Ian fulfilling a lot, like a big part of his hero's journey as far as getting started, but also lets Barley, I almost called him Bartleby. It lets Barley, I love when Barley comes back and, like, Ian's trying so desperately just to get a glimpse of his dad. And, I forgot the name that he has, but he's like, so did Dad say he had a wizard name? And he goes, yeah. And he tells him, and he goes, oh, that's so lame. Like, that's such a lame name. And it's like, that's perfect. Like, it's perfect. The way that they, like, I think it was
Wilden the Whimsical.
Yeah, Wilden the Whimsical. Mm-hmm. And they're like, that's terrible. Like, it's a horrible name. But I love that exact kind of, like, what was Ian needing really? Because Ian was turning 16, but what really is, like, his growth as an adult? Like, what is his stand as an adult is that he realizes he has this spark, this gift inside of himself. And his brother, without a moment of narcissism or jealousy or vanity, immediately says, "Oh, I know, like, we'll do it this way, like, I will train you." And Ian's just like, I don't think Barley really has an idea of what he's talking about, but it turns out, no, Barley does, because it's not that Barley is a giant nerd, it's that Barley is deeply invested in their world's history. For him, it's not like the Dungeons and Dragons insert game isn't like about fantasy, it's about history. And it reminds me a lot more of, instead of him being like your typical 80s D&D, paint, like, what's the paint style they use for the side of the van? I want to say it's like there's a specific style where it's like a specific paint style that they use for that, and it's gosh, that totally derailed.
I know what you're talking about. I'm not gonna be able to pull it though.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, it's a very 80s thing to do with your van. That they, like, there were only a niche group of people who thought that was cool. Everybody else from the time since beginning has known that it's actually super lame. But he's a heavy.
But for the people it's cool to, it's the coolest.
Coolest thing ever. It is 100% the coolest thing ever. But also, like, what they each give up as. It's interesting because each of them have to make an enormous sacrifice in order to complete their journey. Barley sacrifices Guinevere, which is essentially like his great, not just steed, but like stalwart companion. And like, it's a part of him and a part of who he is. And he knows so much about it because he literally built it from its scrap. He put it together and built it from its scrap. And so he sacrifices Guinevere in the film. And then it really comes down to, what is Ian going to sacrifice? And Ian thinks he's sacrificing time with his dad. But in reality, Ian's sacrificing the opportunity to meet his father. Because like they say in the spell, like, the person you summon, you'll never be able to meet again. Yeah. Like, it's your one shot. And he sacrifices that to, once again, taking away, like taking off the scales on his eyes of vanity and narcissism, and really thinking about what his brother needs. And thinking about the fact that, like, yeah, he wants to meet his dad because it'd be like this incredible experience, but Barley needs that closure. He desperately needs that closure, and it's something Ian realizes throughout this journey, and it isn't until he realizes that Barley was a father to him and teaching him and being there for him this entire time. And that is in of itself a sacrifice. Being the central male figure of a home, granted, with their mom, I don't really know if you really need one, because she's a badass. Which also, anything with Manticore and their mom, solid 100%. Every single moment's a banger with those two. Stupendous. Manticore is such an underrated character of this film too. Like, she's barely in a couple of things, but she is so good. And it really is, once again, it's about like, oh, I haven't used my wings in a while. Well, use your wings. Like, use what you have inside of you. And it's kind of this overall, and the final note I'll say about what I love about this film is, it makes a big point to say there is something in there inside of people for everybody. And there's a spark inside of you. Whether you do magic, whether you're a great and knowledgeable warrior like Ian and Barley, whether it turns out their mom's thief class or something, because she like sneaks around and does rogue shit all over the place in this film. And like, even to the point, and something I want to touch on earlier that I forgot to bring back up again is Colt they do an amazing job with Colt, where Colt is doing everything he can to be a part of he wants to be their stepdad, but at the same time, he wants to give them the opportunity to accept him. He doesn't want to force himself into their lives. And they make fun of him for being an earnest goofball. But you can also tell that they like him. And when it comes to running away from him, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. I love when they are mimicking him, and like, they make reference to it beforehand of like how good Ian is at impersonating.
Oh, that's such a good payoff. Such a good payoff with the illusion magic later.
Yeah, and that scene was one of my favorites as well.
I think it'd be remiss if we didn't mention that in some countries, the scene where the two cops pull them over, it's quasi-censored because in majority of all but 2 countries, a reference is made to she's a female cop, and she talks about her wife's kid.
Her girlfriend's daughter.
Her girlfriend's daughter.
Yeah, and that was one of the other bits of trivia that I didn't pull in here, but yeah, Lena Waithe, I believe, who plays that cop, basically asked when she was recording the lines if she could improv or if she could substitute in because the line was originally written as like, oh yeah, my boyfriend's or my husband's kid is giving me trouble, and she basically said, can I sub in my girlfriend? And they were like, yeah, sure, and so it became the headline grabbing Pixar's first lesbian character or whatever thing that of course is gonna like get chopped out, at least that line or whatever it gets chopped out of the more regressive countries.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I think it's important that we do note that, because also I think that entire scene is awesome because it's so good, because it also reveals what Ian thinks of Barley.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most clever ways I've seen them do that kind of like trope of the truth about the one brother or one family member what they really think about the other family member or something coming out. I think it was handled super well in there. And one of the things I didn't like, I just kind of took for granted, I think, when I was first watching it, and that really like drew my eye the second time, is just how that magic is presented on screen, where it like especially when you see like the side shot of, you see Ian talking and you see Colt's face talking as well, like with the projection kind of thing, like they are going through the exact same animations. And so realizing that like that's not just an animator like taking a a different skin and putting it on there or whatever, it is like two animations happening in sync. I was like, oh, that's like it's such a very small thing and it's easily missable, but like that just speaks to, I guess, what a high quality I just have like am ingrained to expect from Pixar, that when I actually sit down and think about like what's really going on digitally in that scene, I'm like, oh, that's actually like really impressive stuff that they did there. So yeah, I thought that was really cool.
It's, for me, I as like the older I've gotten, the more I'm into animated movies, and I think it really struck me with Into the SpiderVerse. What was it, last year? I don't know. Flat circle.
SpiderVerse was 2018.
2018. Okay, yeah, two years ago was Into the SpiderVerse. Of just like appreciating the level of care, detail into the little things that are so easily missed, but they're able to get it. Because I love that scene too of seeing it through their perspective and then seeing it through the cop's perspective, and then seeing like when the magic's starting to fail, like that was fantastic for me. My favorite scene is that brief second where they're in the pool together. It really just hit me where I lived, because there is a memory that my parents tell everyone. Like it's the Joseph was a young lad story of like me in the pool and me telling like someone he was a duty head because he took one of my toys, man. And like that that scene spoke to like the larger scheme of things in my head, of like relating back to that childhood memory, relating back to then going like, oh yeah, all the Sundays that me and my brother went to go to the pool and just like chill out and have fun and see who could dive the deepest type of thing. It's that scene. Also, yeah, when he that the shame that he has because of the way he views his brother as well, hit me really hard. Because sometimes my brother, I'm like, I don't want my brother to interact with some of my friends because maybe some of my friends are cooler. Like, I wouldn't bring my brother near Trevor. Trevor's too cool for my brother. My brother's gonna say something stupid, and like that's kind of sometimes how I felt too. But like the relationship that they capture is it is remarkable. That it's kind of like with Cory Barlog in God of War. It's like, how are you in this room with me and my dad, Cory? How did you get this so well? It's the same thing here of just like how Barley views Ian is the way my brother often tells me he views me. and just seeing how he thinks the world of him. So for me, yeah, the cliche out is the one memory. Also, any scene. Let's get back to me feeling things. Not getting so dang emotional. Any scene with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Octavia Spencer, they crush it.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the Manticore was going to be this, they enter the tavern. She's there. She causes the ruckus, accidentally burns it down. That's it for her character? No, they're like, we got Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Octavia Spencer. We're going to use these two brilliant actresses, and they use them to the best of their abilities. I love when they're at the
pawn shop?
The pawn shop, yeah. Yes. And the woman is like, yeah, I got your sword, but it's going to cost you extra. And they just take it and run with it. Like,
yeah, the scorpion stinger just comes out of nowhere and paralyzes her. It's like, what did you do? Oh my god! Yeah, I agree. It is basically two parallel road trip movies happening. Yep. And I love that. Yeah, anytime we see them. It's a brief cutaway to after some emotional moment has happened with the boys to get a little bit of karmic or comedic relief. But even in the introduction or the pairing up of them, where the mom basically just BS's her way through pretending to be a medical expert just to get the Manticore away, I thought was great. And it's okay, this is absolutely a fun time
because she's a rogue.
And even the Manticore is like, oh, I'm gonna like you, and they end up, I love that little bit at the end of Laurel just getting her axe and being like, we've got girls' night with the Manticore. Mm-hmm. I think there's just so many great little moments that, and especially they shine, I think, a little bit more because it is such a focused story and a small cast that it is. Okay, you've got Ian and Barley, and then you've got those two, and then you've got a little bit of extra ancillary stuff. You've got the Holt here or not Colt here and there. You've got the other cops. You've got the Pixies, kind of all that stuff hopping in and out. But it's really about those two pairings. Is what 90% of this movie is.
I loved at the end where she does the same moves that she's doing in her spin class at home.
That's how she jumps up the dragon is doing those side steps back and forth.
Little parkour.
I am a warrior, whatever her line is.
I forget. But shout out, if I could give a little fun fact to this show.
Of course.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, one of the longest crushes I've had. I've had a crush on her since Seinfeld, since I was a kid.
I mean, haven't all of us?
I mean, I never watched Seinfeld, so I never got really into her. I've never really watched any of her shows actually, but I've respected her from afar.
Yeah. She is hilarious, and that's why I crush on her so bad.
Yeah.
No,
also, I am a mighty warrior is her recurring line.
I am a mighty warrior.
Also,
I am a mighty warrior.
The thing that I didn't like, the only thing, was when he's at school and he's just too awkward.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, hey, what's going on? What do you mean? And I don't know. I'm like, that's not how high school works.
Yeah, it's one of the one of the weaker, I think, moments in the film, but it's really just to set up his anxiousness and his lack of friends, I guess, really. But at the same time, I love that the group of friends that he's trying to hang out with just has a guy in crutches, a troll guy in crutches, there's no point made of it or anything like that. It's just diversity. It's just seeing other people, and he's just there. I think he's even got a Letterman jacket on, so I don't know what he's lettering in. but it's that's cool that I wonder the design story behind that. I wonder why that was the character design that
you can
rose.
You can letter in debate and
you can letter in any number of things. Absolutely, I understand.
Academically Catholic, you can letter in, man.
I lettered in marching band, so it was just still the thing that caught me more was just oh, he's just a guy in crutches, and they don't call attention to it or anything like that. It's just he's one of the gang of people that Ian wants to hang out with and ends up being friends with at the end, kind of thing.
And that's why I like the one thing with the officers, like, oh yeah, my girlfriend's daughter, and like trying to relate to her, and then like all of a sudden like, oh, that's awesome, and then like in the back of my head I'm just like, oh, I want to see a sequel with them. Like, that's interesting. That's cool. Like, yeah, it's the little things.
I think that for me, I watched it and I heard these things, and they just kind of like, it wasn't so much as they like were water off my back. It's just like yes, diversity. Okay. Like, for me, I feel weird when I see a headline like Pixar's first lesbian character. It's like, I don't know. A part of me feels like, yes, we need to recognize representation because it's important that we continue doing it. But another part of me is just like, yeah, because that's people. People are like that. Like, this is how the world actually works and functions.
Yeah.
So
like it's that
catch-22 on that.
Yeah, it's that like, I would love to get to the day where we don't have to celebrate that stuff because it's just the norm. It's just another, part of them being a character in a film or something like that. But it is like, it's hard to, work against 100 years of film where that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Or just, generations upon generations of art where that wasn't the case. Like the conversation that I always think of when people are like, we need more women and people of color in the arts. I'm like, absolutely we do. But like, that's always been the case. Like, go back to Shakespeare's time or whatever. It was still like all white people, all white men, like leading the arts, and go back to like the Greeks. And it's not a new thing. It's a new thing that we're finally being able to break away from that mold and say other diverse voices deserve a chance to tell their stories. And so like, when it comes up specifically in the context of like video games, that's what I'm often thinking about is like, think about how little time on this earth video games have existed and how diverse of stories we're getting from that medium compared to how long books and plays and stuff have been going on and how long it took those mediums to become broader and more diverse. So at least we're seeing it on the film side of things as well too, and in the Pixar side of things and the Disney side of things as it is. Like I can't wait to do the D+ show on Zootopia because I remember seeing that movie and being like, I love that kids are going to grow up with this movie. But yeah, I thought that was just like tiny little things where it's like, oh, that's a cool little, like that's a character that's just in this and doesn't like, they don't draw attention to it. It's just, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm curious why that choice was made because it's not something we're used to seeing. It's not a character that I'm outside of like Breaking Bad. I'm not used to seeing somebody just walking around with crutches. So, but yeah, it was a cool little beat there. Any other favorite moments or any other highlights people want to celebrate?
I mean, I'm sure we could list off tons of them, but I think I feel good about what we've brought up.
Cool. I will say to one of, I think, your earlier points, Joe, or maybe it was Cameron, I don't remember, but whoever kind of talked about like technology, get away from technology. Oh, yeah, I do love that like one of the first things they do going into the adventure is that the magic spell when it backfires, it breaks his phone, and so they don't have a phone with them the whole time, because that's it's a nice get out of jail free card and the kind of thing, in that like it helps establish and explain why the mom can't get a hold of them or why they can't call the mom or any of that kind of stuff. And obviously when the adventure spins out of what they were expecting it to be, and they even have that like realization that they're not going to be able to get back to their mom in time. I love that little kind of like, oh yeah, it's because that phone got smashed right at the beginning of the film. So yeah, I mean, even just there are just a ton of little details, like the fact that Ian is good at sewing because he learned it from his mom, and it wasn't like this is something that only girls should know or whatever. Like it's just taken for granted that like, yeah, he learned to sew, and so he can mend his own like sweatshirt and all that kind of stuff. It's just little things like that I'm like, I appreciate that, like, we've gotten to this kind of point in movies, and Pixar movies in particular. So yeah, lots of good, fun little moments throughout the film. So, with that said, let's go ahead and grade Onward. So this is the report card where we grade the film from A+ to F. Cameron, I'll throw it to you first. What grade would you give Onward?
Solid A+.
Solid A+. Okay. How about you, Joe?
Solid A. Yeah.
Solid A. Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna go with probably an A-, because I think there are things that the film could have improved upon and done a little bit better. But it in the grand tradition of this series, whatever it ends up being, I imagine many a Pixar movie will be in the A range.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just almost always knock it out of the park. So yeah. But
I should note, I'm grading it on a curve. It's actually just an A.
Oh, okay. Oh. It's just an A, but in terms of
I've given everything else that I've ever come on here to talk about an A+. I can't give this an A+ too, because it's not as good as some of the other stuff.
Have you? Oh yeah, I guess you did, because you didn't end up actually coming on the Up and Away episode that you definitely would not have given an A+.
I would have given that film a does not complete.
Yeah,
like an incomplete, like that. Oof.
that film has to come back for summer school.
That film literally, watching that film again, literally traumatized me in a way. You know how nostalgia makes you feel comfort? The inverse happened for me. It's just my life is a lie.
You actually got the meaning of the core nostalgia of pain from you actually got that pain sensation that you're supposed to get with nostalgia. Pain on looking back on the past. All right, so
it was more like my past was a lie.
A's across the board, and then an A- for me. But still, it's a Pixar movie, so go check it out because it's Pixar. Pixar movies, they be great. So diving into extra credit, this is other suggestions you might like if you like this film. So these are these suggestions that Disney Plus offers. You had Toy Story 4, Coco, Cars 3, Finding Dory, The Good Dinosaur, Inside Out, Monsters University, and Brave, which I when I was jotting down this list, I was like, that's an interesting mix, because I feel like apart from maybe Coco and Inside Out, I feel like the rest of those are maybe what people often consider as a lower tier of Pixar movies. So I was like, it's interesting that it's kind of grouping it into common consensus of these aren't the if you were to do a top 10 Pixar movies list, maybe none of these would make it onto that. I don't know, but I feel like broadly speaking, these are choices that would probably not make the cut of a top 10. But yeah, it was an interesting little mix. And then I threw in there one more, as I said in the trivia, Playdate with Destiny is also now available on Disney Plus, and that is the Simpsons short that came with the film, which was very weird for me to see going in, because the short starts out with the iconic Mickey Mouse silhouette, and then it the lights come up and it's Homer with donuts over his ears, and they basically kind of do a whole thing of tying it into hey, welcome Disney welcomes the Simpsons into the Disney family.
It's so weird.
It was a weird little short, and it's oh, that's right, they have the Simpsons now, but they didn't hire any of the actors to come in and do this because it's all a silent thing. It's got Maggie, so there's no voice acting from any of the other characters in the thing. Even the little bits of Marge and Homer we see, they're just completely mute. So it was an interesting short, especially in the history of Pixar usually knocks it out of the park with their pre-film shorts. So it's oh, interesting to see that they brought in use the animation of The Simpsons for one, and it's a cute little story as well. So if you want the full, hey, this is what it would have been like if you'd seen Onward in theaters, I recommend watching the Playdate with Destiny short first and then going on into Onward. Yeah. So that is going to do it for this week's episode. Oh, no, one last segment that I almost skipped over. Apologies. Extracurriculars. So what else have you been watching on Disney Plus? Joe, have you been watching anything else on Disney Plus these days?
So we watched Frozen 2.
Yeah, okay.
It's a sequel. And actually, I love Olaf is because I do have an attention span of a child. I love him. He's just, I've learned something about me in cinema. One, I know nothing. Two, I love the GoPro style shots.
Okay, so
like-
you love him running through the forest.
Exactly, him screaming like that, it gets me every time. That, and I've just been watching a ton, of course, of The Mandalorian, because that's what I do when I'm bored. Oh, also, Clone Wars, last
Yeah.
season.
Yep.
Really great start. Man, let's get them all already.
I've been keeping up with that as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about Frozen 2 because Cameron, back when Frozen 2 had come out, Cameron wrote up like a draft of a review for it for that nerdy site that we never really got back to. Like, I gave some edits and we never really circled back around to it. But I'm pretty sure
Because
Cameron.
you refused to give the first two film reviews 10 out of 10.
I didn't. No, I had.
You didn't? Okay, I thought that's what
like
it was. You're like, I can't do
Logan.
that.
Logan would have been very pissed off about that, but I was, especially because like I had done one of the first film reviews, and it was not a 10. It was.
Oh, that's right. You saw.
I did Dark Waters.
It
which
was Dr. Doolittle.
I mean, well, no, Dr. Doolittle was well after Frozen, but yeah, like I was not opposed to you giving it a 10. Logan had definitely spoken up about that, but I was like, if Cameron wants to give it a 10, he can give it a 10. I just want him to define it better a little bit, because I think
that's true.
you hadn't really given enough of why it's a 10, and then we just never circled back and actually finished up that review. So
it's because it was right around that time we were gearing up to get ready for PAX.
I mean,
Because PAX was a month earlier.
No, because again, like your timeline is way off. Frozen 2 was last year. Well,
You don't understand what this quarantine's done to me, man.
that's absolutely fair. But yeah, Frozen 2 tentatively would have been a 10 out of 10 film for that nerdy site if we'd ever gotten that review
100%.
Updated and finalized. And it's still
Olaf's dark humor, like his actual his becoming cognizant of death and mortality is one of the shining brilliant points of that film.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
I definitely want to get our friend Alex O'Neill to come on and do an episode on this of that D Plus show on Frozen, because I know he is a super diehard Frozen fan. Do you want to say anything, Joe? Anything to add?
Oh no, Olaf's brilliant, and his as his consciousness grows and he's become more aware, fantastic. But you know what? Maybe Frozen 2 is better than I thought it was.
Yeah. And then Cam, what else have you been watching on Disney Plus? Anything?
I've been on a weird kick lately where I've just been watching not Disney, I've been watching Boy Meets World.
Okay.
Just if I haven't watched too much. So for Onward, I actually got my own subscription to Disney Plus because with the quarantine, my nieces and nephew are home all the time, so I don't have any time whatsoever to try to when they're out of the house, sneak in and get an hour or two with Disney Plus on the big TV anymore. It's just not an option.
Mm-hmm.
So I watch Onward on my phone. I have to say, the streaming quality on Disney Plus on to my mobile device while hooked up to Wi-Fi, or sorry, I thought it was hooked up to Wi-Fi. It was actually over my 4G. Still spectacular. So whatever they're doing with their compression and their streaming, the streaming technology, doing a great job with that. Crisped up real nice too. Again, when I didn't even notice that any sort of problem with quality when I was watching it on my phone, and then I hook it back up to Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden it just gets more just crisper in so many different ways. It's okay, here this is good. I didn't lose too much definition, but putting it on a more stable internet connection definitely helps just bring it to that next level.
Yeah.
But I've been watching Boy Meets World because that's the only show I can watch letterboxed.
Okay.
I can't do I wanted to watch more of The Simpsons, but I just can't do the way that they've stretched it out, and the aspect ratio just does not look okay.
Yeah, they're bringing that back to 4:3 though, before too much longer. Interesting, because one of the potential guests that we have, Rave Lord Naito, wants to discuss Boy Meets World, so I might pull you in. He's got a few episodes that he wants to specifically go over and highlight, so I might pull you in for that episode too, Cam.
Interesting note, there's some episodes that are not available on Disney Plus. I think there's 2 episodes.
I mean, so that came up when I was going back and forth with him on that. There was that like originally that not all episodes were on there, but when I was looking at it, like I saw every episode or every season, every episode. So if I'm missing some, maybe, but everything looked like it was there.
I
but
remember
I've not
reading that.
Yeah.
I remember reading that they have all the ones that ever premiered on ABC Family. Because there's one or two episodes that were on ABC proper that when they got moved, or sorry, not ABC Family, when they got moved over to Disney Channel, Disney didn't air 2 episodes because it had to deal with, I forget the subject matter, but basically it was like those
they were the very special episodes.
Very special episodes, yeah. There are like 2 very special episodes. Oh, one has to do with like Sean. Everybody thinks Sean's hooking up with this girl, but it turns out he's protecting her from like her horribly abusive father.
Jesus.
And like they show like her like beaten at one point at the end of the episode when they finally give her the like her friends support her in reporting to the cops and getting her dad arrested, and they're like, it's not just about him being put away. It's like he needs, like, there's other problems here too. And it's like, oh wow, like that is like, once again, this is TGIF, so they were doing, everybody did like these special episodes on very big important points.
I like how this conversation
a night of trauma
started with, I like the compression on Disney Plus. It goes all the way down to some of them, like some dark, and I didn't know that of Boy Meets World. I used to be a big,
Boy Meets
BM
World
fan.
Boy Meets World tackles some.
fan.
Yeah, BMW fan. They tackle some real serious issues in that show. Like, looking back on it, when you really think about it, they discuss like child abandonment. They discussed like really bad, difficult divorce.
I mean, I remember Sean joins a cult at one point in time.
Yep.
No.
Yep, Sean joins a cult, and Eric gets roped in too because Eric's a dummy at this point.
Yeah.
Another thing that happens is Sean's mom not only leaves his dad, but leaves him and takes their motorhome with her, leaving Sean and his dad homeless for an episode before Sean moves in with the Matthews for a little bit, before he moves in with the Turner.
Yeah.
With Mr. Turner.
Well, I will work on.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I will work on getting that Boy Meets World episode up and running, and we can do some research for that episode on whether or not they're actually missing episodes on Disney Plus, or if they're there and just not found, or if it was a write-up and they weren't there originally but they're there now, or something like that. We will investigate that for the Boy Meets World episode coming soon to that D Plus show. So yeah, in terms of so I think Clone Wars is probably really the only other thing I've been watching on Disney Plus a lot recently. I've been a couple weeks ago on that Nerdy Site show, Jazz talked about how she'd fallen into Community now that it's on Netflix, and I was like, Community was such a damn good show. So I've been rewatching through Community a lot, and enjoying that show. And it is still a very, very good show. I rewatched the episode where they play a video game, and it's done in like pixel art style and stuff, and I was like, God, they just went places with that show, and it's just so good.
Chang did blackface. It was weird.
Yeah, that was a rough moment.
They call him out.
I mean, yeah, they absolutely call him out for it in the Dungeons.
They're like, "What are you
Dragons
doing?" He goes,
episode.
"Well,
I'm a dark elf."
And they're like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and then they kill him off pretty quickly. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so now that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, guests, for joining me to talk about Onward. You can follow my guests. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to shout out, Cameron?
Right now, no.
Okay.
I mean, quarantine has. I'm doing everything I can to stay sane in quarantine.
Okay.
And today that had to do with Chipotle.
Nice. I left my house for the first time in like a week because I've just been having like stuff delivered here, and I basically went and like picked up Jersey Mike's sandwich. So, like that was my first big outing.
That's crazy.
In I don't know how many days. But yeah,
you just got to get out of the house sometimes, man. You just got to get out of the house.
Yeah. And as turnabout is fair play, when I had gone on and done the trophy room a couple weeks ago, Joe joked about, or didn't joke. He felt bad because he'd forgotten to give me a chance to really plug who I was and what I did at the top of the show, and so I did the same thing here. So you can follow Joe.
I thought that was weird. I thought it was so weird that you weren't giving him like a better introduction.
No, it's so deserved.
This is weird. Okay,
it's so deserved.
You can follow Joe at Mr. Badbit. Joe tells a little bit about Badbit games and your podcasts and your whole empire of content creation.
Oh man, so real talk, I felt so bad because that episode is one that I feel so much shame for, because it was just it is like, I feel like at this point we're dealing with Quarantine Joe, and Quarantine Joe has forgotten how to communicate to people effectively. So I actually went back to that episode and did the elevator pitch of that nerdy site and everything you guys and gals do over there. So first and foremost, thank you for having me on. And you can find me. Thank you so much. You can find me over at Badbit Games, where we talk about all things game news, reviews, and unboxings over at Badbit Games on YouTube. And you can find the Trophy Room, a podcast made by the players for the players, each and every Thursday. It's a PlayStation show I do with my best friend Kyle. This week we had Adam Bankhurst of IGN on, and we talked about Cyberpunk, PS5 SKUs, the future of the PlayStation 5, all that stuff you can expect over there at the Trophy Room about PlayStation and whatnot. And you can find the show on Twitter, PS Trophy Room on iTunes, on Google Play, on Spotify, wherever you get your RSS feed. So there you go.
Great, excellent. And I'll have links of all your stuff littered throughout the description of the podcast and YouTube videos and all that stuff. You can follow me over at Trevor J. Starkey. Basically, I don't really have anything specific to plug. I will likely be working on a review of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Doom Eternal here in the coming days. So hopefully I'll get that out in the next week or so. And I'm sure as Cameron finished Final Fantasy VII Remake like last night as we're recording this, I'm sure he and I will do a follow-up to our That Nerdy Site Show episode where we did spoiler-free impressions of the game with a spoiler cast version of that show. So I'm sure that will be coming somewhere down the line, because I'm sure we both have many, many thoughts about that game. Keep an eye out at That Nerdy Site for all that stuff. If you would like to be on this show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest and let us know what Disney Plus offering you would like to chat about, and I'll reach out to you and try and start scheduling those. And if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us over at Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Badbit also has a Patreon, patreon.com/badbitgames, right? But
no,
you guys are...
Yeah, it's paused at the moment. Yeah,
and you guys are paused at the moment during the COVID quarantine days, whereas we will shamelessly still take people's money. You can go support either of our patrons whenever Badbit opens theirs back up. Thank you for joining us. Thank you guys again for joining me to talk about Onward. This very bizarrely, it released a month and a half ago in theaters, and now we're talking about it on this podcast kind of thing. But good times, great conversation. Love chatting with you guys about it, especially as the one of us that does not have a big brother that could relate to those moments of the story. But as always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.